Welcome back. Where did racial discrimination begin and how did it start? In the United States alone, there are millions of descendants of African people enslaved formally in America, and many of us have heard stories from that time handed down from family member to family member. Rick Richardson and Sandra D are one such couple and have put these stories to paper in their new novel, Southern Secrets, Sins of the Past. Their book tracks the tales of the last Africans brought to America and sold into slavery. Amongst them are some of their own relatives. And so welcome, Sandra D.
Hi.
How are you?
Thank
Rick
you.
Richardson?
Nice to meet
So
you.
glad to have you
Thanks for
here.
having us.
This is fascinating because I learned some things about history that I didn't know, and I thought I was a pretty good student. You talk about a ship coming into Mobile. Tell us about that ship coming in. This is after the laws changed.
The Clotilda.
The Clotilda.
You want to go ahead and start?
Well, about 50 years after the importation of slaves were outlawed, a group of Southern gentlemen made a bet that they could go to Africa and bring back some slaves.
Bring
And they
back
did
some
this.
African
Some
people to
African
be
people.
sold into slavery.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. And they did this.
Wow.
And so-
50 years after the laws changed?
After the law changed.
So it was just on a bet, we're going to bring some African people back and sell them into slavery. And
Yes.
they did it?
They did.
Yes.
They succeeded.
Yes.
They did.
Wow. How did they do it?
Well,
And why would they do something like that?
they
It's just-
gathered men to help them on this ship. They just gathered a bunch of men from anywhere to help them to go on this ship. They went overseas to get the Africans. They grabbed them from their village and just put them on the ship.
Wow.
And brought them to America.
Oh my God. Now, how does that relate to your story of your families?
Well, about 5 years ago, I attended a family reunion, and I learned something. I found out that my great-great-grandmother was on that ship.
Wow.
The ship was called the Clotilda, and it docked in my hometown of Mobile, Alabama.
Wow. What was your grandma's name?
Ariba.
Ariba. Now, did she tell you the story of how that happened?
It had been passed down for generations. I had heard stories when I was a child living in Mobile about Africans coming over and how my grandmother was on that ship. But as a child, I didn't pay any attention to it, and my father kind of swept it under the rug. But older relatives kept telling me stories that had been passed down from generations.
Now, you know, see, this is one of the key things, what you just said. Relatives sweeping it under the rug.
Yes.
Because I know that's happened in my family, although there's a younger branch of the family where we actually found our first African ancestor who was 15, brought here in 1839 and sold into slavery, 15-year-old boy from Nigeria.
Yeah.
And Nigerians recognize me when they see me too. They say, you're not the same color, but we see the Nigerian face because the features are identical.
You're absolutely right. I don't know why, but a lot of African Americans don't want to talk about the history.
It's a painful history.
Yes,
It's
a painful history,
yes, it's
true enough,
painful.
but you can learn from that history.
Yes, you can, but
A
when
lot
your
of that.
pain says, that's too painful for me to even face it, I just have to tuck it under, and that's, you know, when I wrote my book, When Mama Couldn't Tell Us About Love, and I'm so happy to see your book when I was going through it, I was going, oh my God, this is fabulous, because a lot of what we talked about in terms of psychological, emotional healing, you touch on
Yes.
in the stories. But the key is, one of the ways our ancestors survived is we're not going to talk about it. We're just going to keep going, because if I talk about it, I might break down.
Yeah.
Because it is so painful. Now, what motivated you to write this book? Southern Secrets, Sins of the Past.
Like I mentioned before, my family reunion I attended, when I heard the story, I was just blown away.
Yeah.
You know, and I said to myself, God, I want to unearth my ancestors' past and dust it off and see what their lives must have been like. And also because I wanted my kids to know.
Oh, you wanted your
I
children
wanted my
to know
kids
the stories.
Yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
So I decided to write this book.
What did your children think or feel when they learned the stories?
They couldn't believe it. They were astounded. Actually, they helped me in certain parts. I had them
good.
initially, before my wife Sandra came on board, I had them helping me write the initial story.
I got on board because it was a lot of things that I did not know. I wasn't taught this information in school.
Right.
I didn't know about this. I
Yes.
didn't know about the last slave ship. And there's an interesting part in the book where those last slaves that came, or Africans that came over, they created a town.
Really?
And it's still here
Still
today.
here today.
What's
It's
the
called
town?
Africatown, and it's in Mobile.
Oh my God.
And that's interesting
See, I didn't know
information.
that.
Absolutely.
So there's so much, and that the African people who are, I've traveled on the African continent, and in West Africa, in Senegal, there's some of the just hardest working, just brilliant people who are entrepreneurial and all these kinds of things. And then I think, how much changed when our African ancestors were brought here? Because when I went there and I saw how different people were, I went, oh, that's the difference that being brought here made. Now, this is the only country in the world, and this is an important point that is also, I think, brought out in your book. This is the only country in the world where the former enslaved people and the former slave owners went on to live side by side.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
in all other countries, those Europeans went back to Europe
Very true.
and left just a small amount of people behind to kind of carry on. But
Absolutely.
here, we're side by side. So the brainwashing that went on for 300 years is still in everybody's mind.
Yes, yes.
And
that is true.
it's deep.
And Africatown is very close to where the slave master had his home, his plantation.
So one of the things your book does, Southern Secrets, Sins of the Past, is it gives us a chance to learn the history. And I always say that prejudice is the bastard child of ignorance. That's a quote from Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes.
And you're breaking through some ignorance for all of us
Yes.
with your book. Well, thank you for writing it. And what's the one thing you want to leave us with from the book very quickly?
Well, I think we wrote the book at the 7th grade reading level so that youth could really get on board. And we cut the pages down from 350 to
Great.
about 200
So this
pages.
is a book that children
Yes.
could read. Okay, thank you for joining us, Sandra and Rick. The book is Southern Secrets, Sins of the Past. Her website is richbooksinc.com. We leave you now with